So now that everybody's here and we can hear everybody, this is our friend Dan, like we were saying before. My friend Dan. We've been friends since I first moved to Omaha. Sorry, I'll go back through it for real again. Dan and I have found ourselves in multiple conversations about political topics and agendas, and oftentimes find ourselves potentially on opposite sides of the aisle or with different views, but we always end up with a good conversation. We always end up having a beer together, giving each other a hug when we get done, and we don't let maybe what we disagree about stand in the way. And what I was saying, and then Dan responded to, so I'll let you say that again. We want to try to break the mold of just having the same people on that always agree with us, that share the same ideas that we might have. We want to get out of that echo chamber of just bringing in people and us sitting around and patting each other on the back and telling us how smart we are and how much we know about the world. So,
And like I said on the first take, that's really commendable. Not a lot of podcasts do that, because we want to hear what we want to hear. We want to have our ideas reinforced and whatnot. But it is important from time to time to challenge our preconceived notions so that we don't get stuck in an echo chamber, because it's not all that far off to be within that echo chamber, and then the next thing you know, you're believing like QAnon satanic like baby killing shit. Like if you echo chamber hard enough, you can go from Benghazi and emails to Donald Trump was divinely chosen by God to destroy this invisible Jewish pedophile ring.
well, and we've talked about it before, and I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but Facebook has literally monetized their business model off of creating these echo chambers for people by directing them. And again, I don't think they're necessarily doing it on purpose to, start a storm on Capitol Hill, but that's the result of what happens when you click you comment on all of those different people that are creating that narrative of the election was stolen and we got to take back the Capitol. You're creating that exact echo chamber for people to exist within and say, you know what, damn it, we do need to storm the Capitol. We do need
Mm-hmm.
to hang Mike Pence and kill Nancy Pelosi. Like, what? No, guys,
And
relax.
and
Like,
don't let the liberals snidely scoff at it either, because when they lose to Donald Trump in 2016, what's the first thing they do? They start talking about unsubstantiated and later proven to just be minute Russian election interference. All the Russian government did, good or not, is did targeted ads at people. That's what they did. They didn't steal ballots. They didn't make him lose the vote. Well, lose the electoral college anyway. But the fact of the matter is, liberals are not immune from that either. We call
right.
that phenomenon, at least from colloquially the left, we call that the Pud Pipeline. There's actually a term for it, because people will watch PewDiePie videos, and then the longer people watch a video, the more you have a monetary incentive to have it extend its length. Um, and to get likes, which is a challenge. But when you have edgy situations like with PewDiePie, for example, where he did that first stunt with, well, not a stunt, but he said the N word on a live stream, not good. And then the second thing he did was he got those, I think they were Southwest Asian or Southeast Asians. I don't remember specifically. It might have been India, Pakistan. Got them to hold up that sign about Jewish people, and like the algorithm knows how to funnel people into more extreme content, whether it be on the left or on the right. And that's like a proven business model phenomenon. That's how I can look up. That's how I can look up a video about like any of the keywords, SJW, whatever. I click 5, 6 videos. I'm at Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan. I watch another 3 or 4, and I'm watching Stefan Molyneux literally just talk about the Jewish satanic conspiracy to eat people's babies. It's bananas. YouTube is very fucking well aware of it. It's very well documented, and it should be, in my opinion, regulated. At a certain point, you are responsible for like the massacre that occurred in New Zealand when you're mentioned by name as your political driving factor. If that's not inciting violence, I don't know what really is.
Right.
Like, to an extent, you're accountable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Um, and that's basically what, we've talked about at nauseum on this show before. How these algorithms are put together to make money, but at a certain point in time, you have to say, okay, I have a moral obligation here to put monetization aside and do what's right for people and get them to a point where they're getting the information they want, not the information that we're giving them. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's the user's choice to continue to watch QAnon videos or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, but what we're getting at though is that's not an overnight process.
Exactly.
Up until 2000, the last time I think even like Chris Hayes. So Chris Hayes, for some of your viewers that might not know who he is, he's a liberal pundit on MSNBC. He's does stuff like what Rachel Maddow would do. So that's kind of where he leans, is like center left. But they would not stop talking about election interference up even through last year. So like I said, the liberals are just as guilty of it. The problem is that, like, yeah, I agree with you in that at a certain point you have a moral obligation to put a stop to content that is by name mentioned when you scythe down a bunch of people with a fucking gun.
Right.
Like, your name is on that.
And that's one thing I've always appreciated about you, Dan, is you have the same kind of idea or way of thinking that we do, in the sense that we don't really care if you're a liberal or a Democrat or a Republican or conspiracy theorist, whatever. We just want you to A, value people's lives, and B, call out BS when you see BS. It doesn't matter what they're called, what they look like, who they are, what their political affiliation is. When you see something that you're like, hey, that doesn't sit right with me, you're not hiding behind.
You have a moral obligation to act.
Yeah, you're not.
Period.
You're not saying, they're Republican and I'm Republican, so what they're doing must be right.
Well, I'm glad he only went and shot up a mosque because I'm not there. Like, what the fuck? You can't have it both ways.
Right. You can't just pick and choose based on what happens.
Exactly. Sorry, Ben. I feel like I've been cutting you off. I don't know.
No, you're good. I've been letting you guys ride.
Ben's coming from us live from Texas also, by the way. He's down there for Air Force training stuff, which is why he doesn't have that super ugly Arkansas
not behind
flag,
my
whatever it is.
normal setup. It's
Hence,
partly the reason why we had technical difficulties in the beginning, but we worked through it and we're here now.
Exactly. And Combo brings up a good comment that is one of our talking points tonight. Call out BS when you see it. Me, Ted Cruz in Cancun. That's one of our talking points for tonight. And by the way, the memes with his hair braided, and like the pina coladas, SNL did a hilarious skit last night.
Yeah, seeing a bunch of them.
So funny.
Him dressed up as like Jimmy Buffett. And oh man.
Yeah.
And then, like, so many people have said, immediately saying, well, my kids wanted to go to Cancun, so... And I don't necessarily think he was, quote-unquote, blaming it on his daughters, but he was doing a pretty good job to say, look, man, this wasn't my idea, all right? This wasn't my idea. The kids wanted it.
I wanted to stay and help the state, but my daughters really wanted to go to Cancun, so I just did what I could to make them happy. Okay,
let's call that shit the way it is. He threw his goddamn kids under the bus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
for sure.
Like, that's 1,000%.
Ted, go to fucking Cancun, but don't when the public backfires at you because the Midwest is the coldest place on the planet and pipes are bursting and you get 5 minutes of power an hour, you don't get to go, oh, my 8-year-old daughter, what would you do? Would you be a good dad? Shut the fuck up, Ted Cruz. Are you out of your goddamn mind?
Well, and
I mean, he could have just as easily said, well, yeah, I went to Cancun. I'm not. You been to Texas right now? I don't know. I'm not good with that. I'm out.
Yeah, I feel like it would have gone over better if this man had stood up in front of a camera and just been like, "It's cold as fucking Texas. I'm out."
You'd be like, "Hey, man, if you could leave, you would too." That's more relatable than
right.
Exactly.
than berating your
than chucking the whole family under the bus.
Exactly. By saying, "What do you want me to do? Stay and do what? Like, you want me to go start, unfreezing parts of Texas, with my magical fire hands, or what? What do you want me to do?"
Yeah, part of the job though, that you sign up for is you're essentially a representative. I mean, obviously you are an elected representative of your state, but if you want to be a good politician, which Ted Cruz certainly seems to not want us to believe to be the case, you don't do shit like that. If your state is freezing over, stay home. I firmly believe that one of the primary drivers of Joe Biden winning this last election happened because his team realized if we want to win, if we want to even possibly sneak over that line to victory, we need to get Joe to shut up. We need to stop the gaffes, stop the public touching of kids. Like, you're creepy. People think you're creepy, man. You're like dementia ridden. Like, you can barely say a sentence, my man. People don't relate to that. Donald Trump may be out here being like, yeah, I mean, but who's to say, And you're like, well, you're a slimy piece of shit, but he seems to be there. Whereas with Joe Biden, I mean, there's that why clip, It just, fuck, man.
Yeah. Well, you're exactly right. And that's what a lot of people...
painful to watch.
A lot of people that I listen to...
Very painful.
A lot of people that I listen to podcast-wise said all along, Joe Biden's not going to beat Trump. The only person that can beat Trump is Trump. So if he continues to get in his own way and can't shut up, he's going to beat himself. Yeah, he's going to run himself out of it.
Exactly. The DNC did your job for you, man.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, really.
Joe Biden.
Yeah.
If Joe Biden had lost, he would be the first president to ever lose 3 separate presidential bids. Like, he would be he would have been the first politician to go for that. He'd be 0-3 for running for president.
We were this close to greatness.
Yeah, and combo brings
I'm just kidding. But no, that was the thing that the Biden camp really realized a lot quicker, was that Joe needed to shut up, and Trump was just too much of a narcissist to shut up.
We have to do exactly 2 things. We have to get, because of the Black Lives Matter, because of the police movement that occurred over the summer, which Alex knows I was pretty heavily involved in. What they had to do exactly 2 things to beat the Democrats, or to get Joe Biden president. They needed to co-opt BLM. They needed to then flip it into abolish the police, defund the police, initiate a committee to investigate the violence against the police. They needed to do that, and they needed to stop Bernie Sanders. They needed to do both of those things to win. And the liberals were able to do that, because if Bernie Sanders wins, the liberals kind of really lose when you think about it. Because I think a lot of people equate Bernie Sanders with they put him in the same category as people like Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, what have you. Pick your Democrat. But the thing that really separated Trump and Bernie was to the extent that they were populist movements. That's not really a debate. Trumpism, which some would argue closely resembles fascism due to how it equates nationalism and police authority and big guns. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about there, but they view that the same as when Bernie Sanders is saying we should have free health care. We shouldn't have a wall. We should, and by free, obviously, I mean, it's not free. Everybody knows that. I'm not going to get baited into that.
Well, I think you'd be surprised how many people, but that's a really good point because again, both sides do it. Some people hear free health care, and living in Nebraska, we both live in Nebraska. I know a lot of very right-wing people that are like, free health care, somebody's got to pay for it. Well, if it was truly just free, and I'm not a huge fan of like the free healthcare idea. I think that there's some good principles that can be used within it, but I'm still a free market kind of guy. If it's truly free market and we're not being hosed by incredibly high doctor bills that no one can pay for, and if you don't have insurance, you're basically just screwed for the rest of your life. Don't like that.
Yeah, the problem right now is that unchecked capitalism is doing what unchecked capitalism does. Eventually, if you play the game correctly, and you follow that logic all the way to its conclusion, if there's 5 bread makers in town, and then you can cut costs, reduce labor, increase profit, cut costs, reduce labor, increase profit, acquire one, you rinse and repeat that, and then eventually have all of them. The problem is unregulated capitalism. People confuse that very often with crony capitalism. The system, these are issues by the system, not as a bug, but they're a feature of it. This is the goal. This is how it is supposed to be done. Increase efficiency, increase output, increase all of that. And then eventually someone's going to win. The problem from my perspective is that you can definitely apply that to movie franchises. You can definitely apply that to video games, but you don't, in my opinion, morally, I don't think that healthcare belongs in that category of things to be competed over. I think it's a human right, and I think that if you adjust for inflation just what the taxpayer pays originally, if you adjust that proportionately to what the government has to subsidize these hospitals for, an example I'm thinking of is my appendicitis. Had I not had insurance, that was a $150,000 bill. I don't have that money when I'm 16. So, whether or not it's apparent, you guys paid for that because the government bailed out the insurance company who didn't get paid as a result of that. With the Medicare for All solution, what we're really going for is let's cut out the middleman. Why do we need the insurance company at all? If you give everybody health care, the entire nation as a whole pays less. And that's not a debate. That's the science. That's the math behind it. I think if more people understood that what we're saying is instead of paying $400 a month for your family's health insurance, you're basically only going to pay $300 over the year in taxes. You're actually, as a nation, our deficit would go down if we did that. That's the capitalist argument for that's the capitalist market for, or argument for like a free market solution. But if you apply that same logic on its head, it doesn't work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I think where I would not disagree but push back on is basically I don't really want the government telling me who I can and can't go to the doctor with. If you want to give me a tax rebate because I have privatized insurance through my work company or whoever it might be, that's fine. I don't necessarily want to pay the taxes behind it because I'm not utilizing that service. But if there wants to be something like that where you can sign up and say, hey, $300 a year or you might $300 a month over the course of the year, and you might have longer wait times. You might have, us telling you which doctor you can see, what procedure you can or can't have. I just don't personally, and I guess I'm fortunate in that realm, but I also see both sides because my girlfriend doesn't have health insurance at all. She works at a beauty salon. She's an assistant manager of a beauty salon, and she doesn't have health insurance, and I see the struggles that come along with that, and I'm fortunate to work at a job where I do have health insurance, and it's actually pretty good health insurance, so I don't have those same struggles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have great insurance as well. The problem is that, like, let's say, for example, here's my moral issue with it, if I can be frank with you, okay? Mm-hmm. So my moral issue is I was obviously laid off with COVID, essentially, I was working construction for a company here in Omaha, and as a supervisor, like a foreman, that kind of thing. So I was working construction here. I had great insurance. I lost that insurance, but due to the timeline, by the time Pelosi in the House and then the Senate approved, that that stimulus bill, which also included if you've been on, you get to retain your health insurance. Because of that, that didn't occur in time for me. I missed that deadline. So what ended up happening is I had to go and pay for a doctor's appointment for a specialist. I have to see a specialist about every 3 months for my back. Now, out of pocket, including the medication, costs me about $1,300. Hence why I have insurance, but that brief fleeting period of time from April of last year up until very recently, I didn't have health insurance. So
yeah,
I have paid about probably $4,500 just in medical bills out of pocket. I am blessed and I am fortunate that I can afford that I have saved for that I've been able to do that. But there should not be a barrier for entry to be able to see a doctor. That's my argument as someone who is basically coming from the standpoint of everyone is going to save money, and then on top of that, everybody deserves what I have, if not better. The whole the government's going to tell me what doctor I can and can't go to, and on top of that, as a result of that, they're going to tell me I can or can't have a surgery, or I will or I won't have a death panel. All those talking points. I mean, to be frank with you, Alex, like those have all been like really thoroughly debunked. When you socialize medicine, you're not socializing the market. Those are different things. If you were to say live in the late Soviet Union or Vietnam, that might be true, where they do have a state-run economy, or well, a state influenced economy, because it's not communism. But in the way that our system is set up would be that private insurance would just essentially cease to exist, and then everybody would be able to go to whatever doctor they would want. Like, you wouldn't have to change anything about your lifestyle. The only difference is you'd pay a little bit less. Now, would people have to wait longer? That was another thing you said, and that's a good point. Initially, if you stagnate it in the way that Bernie Sanders was describing, I think that even that is like too conservative. I don't think it needs to be a 10-year process to get everyone on Medicare or Medicaid. But even if you staggered it over the course of 8 to 10 years, I think that's being overly safe, because that's enough time to basically switch over to that system. And I know that because so your listeners might not know this, but I grew up in foster care, so I had government health insurance, because I have to have health insurance. So I had, by default, as a ward of the state of Nebraska, I received Medicaid. Now, the only reason that you can't go see any doctor you want, or any pharmacy you want, is because that insurance industry exists. There are certain insurers that will or won't allow you to conduct business, at your location. Mm-hmm. But short of that, if switching to a Medicare for all system, slowly and gradually, you would be able to have all of those things, just like the other 29 nations of what we may call the quote unquote developed world. This is not something that America is too big to be able to handle. That's another argument I've heard. And the numbers just don't pan out. If the actual argument is that sounds really complicated and that sounds kind of scary, and certain demagogues are telling me that's a bad idea and I trust them, and I'm nervous about that, that's a fair conversation. We can have that conversation. But if it automatically turns into the Sarah Palin McCain era nonsense of, well, socialized medicine will then therefore mean the government gets to decide if Granny has a DNR on her body, a do not resuscitate.
Yeah.
And that's just simply, quite frankly, that's simply out of date, Cold War, anti-left, anything nonsense.
Well, you're familiar with the Charlie Gard situation, right?
Give me a recap on that, and I can tell you yes or no.
Young boy in Great Britain, it was in the UK, basically had a terminal illness, and at a certain point in time, the government said, we're not paying. It was under socialized free healthcare for all. We're not paying for his surgeries anymore because they basically pronounced the child dead before he was dead. And his parents kept saying, well, wait a minute, like, he's alive. What do you mean you're not going to keep paying for his treatments? And they're like, well, in our eyes, he's terminal. There's nothing we can do anymore. We're not paying for his visits anymore. And when I heard that story, I was like, that's the exact situation. And let me put it to you this way. If there's a way, and I'm not a doctor and I'm not an economist, right? If there's a way for us to get healthcare for everybody and it doesn't change the normal everyday to-day situation for American citizens who go to work, who work hard, or nice people, by all means, like, let's do it. I am in no way saying that having healthcare for everybody isn't something that I would like to sign up for.
You're making sure there's a legitimate plan, that it's thought out, and that there's follow through.
And my biggest problem is, I'm a small government guy. I'm a more local, state level decision type of fellow, I guess you could say. I don't want Trump or Hillary or Biden or Bush, any of them, the figureheads, I'm using them as like the government, them. I don't want them telling me what I can and can't do when I can go to State Farm, Liberty. In fact, I just changed insurance companies because I was like, man, I feel like this is really this is high. And I found another insurance company that cut my rates like in half, same exact coverage. I'm like, to me, and maybe it's just because that's the world that I live in, and that's just my only really personal experience with it. That's what I think a free market creates. And the idea, and again, like we talked about it already, free markets swallow up the smaller guy, swallow up the smaller guy, and then they become a monopoly. You can't have that either. But I just don't want the government or a faction of the government telling me again that my terminally ill son isn't, worthy of the government's dollar anymore to go get his treatment in his final days. You know what I mean?
And that's fair. To be forthcoming, I'm not aware of that case. I would have to look into it.
Yeah, you definitely should. And that,
yeah,
Dan, that's exactly why we have these conversations, because you've already made some points that I'm like, hey, that's a good, fair, and honest point. And I try to listen to as many left-leaning people as I do right-leaning people. If I'm being completely honest, I probably listen more to like the right centrists, if you will. And those are the stories that get talked about.
What do you consider a right centrist?
I would say,
just so I know where we're at on my spectrum.
I would say like you're, gosh, I'm trying to think, like a Joe Rogan almost type, although he's kind of more on the left. Maybe, gosh, I'm blanking on names now. I'll tell you who I do listen to a lot. I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan. Ben Shapiro has a lot of takes that I disagree with, but he says a lot of things that I think make sense. I listen to Dax Shepard's podcast, who's a left-leaning guy. So I try to not just surround myself with people who identify one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't need you to tell me that I'm right. That's not.
No, exactly.
Not gonna. What is that going to do?
It's the idea of I listen to 20 minutes of Fox News and then I listen to 20 minutes of CNN. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So to go back to that, to touch on the healthcare again real quick, what I would equate your analogy to, because it's actually a very good analogy. You could get a better rate. You switch to have a better rate. But the what I thought was super interesting about that analogy is that it's so close to what I'm talking about that I can actually like see your train of thought behind it. But the problem in it, in that analogy, is that you have to have the money to buy a car, and owning a car by the DMV's very definition is a privilege, not a right. Another important part of my argument with healthcare is that I do believe that healthcare is a human right. If the systems that were in place when I was a child, I didn't choose foster care, I mean, who would?
Yeah.
It's not a great deal. I mean, I got to go to college. Pretty cheap. But as far as Thanksgiving, people got to bring me a plate, man. So I would trade you for sure.
No, I know what you mean.
But that's
maybe
that's
not
the thing.
Maybe not the example that I just brought up is the best one as far as like healthcare insurance versus homeowners and auto insurance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously, we've talked about it again on here before. There's a lot of these, what we've referred to as 1% issues, where 99% of the population should say, hey, insurance for foster kids, like, we're all on board with that, right? Like, hey, insurance for, kids who are brought here illegally, just because their parents, didn't have the right things in place for them, like, we're going to treat them right. I'm just using that as like a random situation. And
the difference I think between you and then other people that I associate with that I would, think are more neoconservative or even like right leaning, is that you have that. What I think you and I can agree on is that there is a moral compass, and there are moral stakes at play. And I feel like too often times people like Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, to an extent, people on the left such as Vosh, they remove that, and they condense the entire human experience down to like a numbers equation. Yeah. Whereas you and I look at it, and religiously, I don't know if your listeners know that about either you or I, but I'm an atheist, and for the time I've known Alex, he's a Christian.
Yep.
And we've always connected over how odd it is that we have the exact same moral compass and we believe quite literally the opposite thing. And
just about how we got here, really. I
remember that was one of our first conversations turned into something like that.
Yeah.
And
well, also I'll never forget this moment when we were at my house at the lake house playing beer pong, and my brother put on Fall Out Boy, Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner acoustic. And you like stop in your tracks and you go, is this Nobody Put Baby in the Corner acoustic? And I was like, I like that guy. I like that guy a lot.
I remember another good one for your listeners is there was a there was a Halloween party that Alex had at his parents' house. Jeez, this would have been 5-6 years ago? No, it had to be a little longer than that, maybe 7 years ago.
You're talking like 7-8 years, yeah.
Yeah, where so Johnny Manziel is a football player. If you don't follow football, the name's not super important, but basically he was an all-star that season. He beat number 1 Alabama. It was crazy. He was a crazy good quarterback for his age, and they called him Johnny Football. And for Halloween that year, I went out to a sporting goods store here in Omaha called Dick's Sporting Goods, and I bought an entire legitimate football like uniform, pads, shoulder, everything. I bought the whole thing. And then because they didn't offer a Texas A&M number 2 jersey in an adult size, I had to buy it in a youth large, and it was tight. And I showed up at Alex's Halloween party. I did not take my sunglasses off all night. I had my hair in a faux hawk, and I had stopped at a craft store and bought about $600 in fake $1 bills. And I was walking around his parents' house throwing them at women.
Yep. We had a lot of those to clean up the next day, actually, thanks to you. Yeah, that was
That was a good party, though.
It was, yeah.
Everybody had a great time.
No alcohol consumption whatsoever. It was very clean, good, clean family fun, if you will.
I find that hard to believe.
No, dude. No, come on. You know me.
That's why I find it hard to believe. It's because I know you.
Abby just said in the comments, "Oh my God, I remember this. There was money everywhere."
I think at one point at that party, if I remember correctly, Abby came to say something to me, and I had just folded over like 60 fake $1 bills, and I go, "I'm gonna pay you so I don't have to listen to this." Just because remember I was a dick all night. Like I put up like the whole persona. I wasn't wearing a Johnny Football uniform. I was Johnny Football that night.
Yeah.
I think Dan Hawks was like, that was the closest I ever came to fighting you. Because his girlfriend was there, and I walked by, and I was like, you could do better. And then you gave me the money, Dan. That was bullshit.
Anyway, we'll move on. We could tell stories for hours. So we talked about Ted Cruz, bad look. Probably not the best look in the world. And now we'll move on to the other side of the aisle and our old friend Andrew Cuomo in New York.
I have so much to say about Andrew Cuomo.
I know you do, because you hate him so much.
I hate him so much.
And I got to be honest, I don't like the guy. Not a fan.
You and I will have a beer over that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Andrew Cuomo, as an entity, my biggest issue with him is liberals do this really fucking odd thing. I don't know how to quite explain it, but what they do is they sexually fetishize anyone who is what I would call, quote unquote, the adult in the room. Like they did it with Dr. Fauci. They did it with Andrew Cuomo, and the whole time they're just, yes, queen, doing that, pumping him up. The guy runs out of he runs out of New York. He's in the New York political machine.
Preach, girl. Yes, queen.
And you know what they don't talk about Andrew Cuomo? You know what they don't talk about? The liberals don't talk about?
They don't talk about a lot.
Yeah, they don't talk about how he condemned nearly 300,000 homeless people in the city of New York to death. They don't talk about how on Rikers Island there was at one point a 37% COVID test positive rate, while the UN was begging him to release people from jail because you have the power. We're talking people who are held without bail, meaning they don't have the money for bail, or meaning that they don't have the money for bail, or for whatever reason they're not allowed bail, but they're nonviolent. It's nonviolent people. It's, let's say, your second DUI, or something to that
misdemeanor
effect.
Drug charge.
Misdemeanor drug charge, or like a low-level felony drug charge.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. The UN Health Council begged the United States and begged Andrew Cuomo to release those prisoners, because by definition and by design, you can't facilitate social distancing in a jail or in a prison. It can't be done. And obviously, I mean, I could go on with examples of how they, attempted to have the best of both worlds and have prisoners alternate, feet, foot to head and then head to foot, and just nonsense bullshit that was never going to fix anything. Cuomo did that. He took him, I believe, 3 weeks to put up the rent moratorium, and he didn't offer a rent freeze or a rent stoppage. So New Yorkers are getting kicked out of their homes today, right now, right as we speak. Andrew Cuomo, as the governor, as the executive officer of the state of New York, could have done anything to fix this. There are a myriad of things he could have done to handle this. And instead, what he ended up doing is killing, and then this is like something that didn't have to happen. Advertently, inadvertently, I'd argue advertently, because you're aware of the consequences. He killed a ton of black people, black and BIPOC, and just because they're disproportionately affected by COVID, just due to the very nature of how COVID works. People like to say things like COVID doesn't see color. No, but what it does see is Black single mothers often do not have access to health care. Black men often do not have jobs that allow them to obtain health care. And the poverty rate as it is as a whole is about equivalent to the incarceration rate. The virus does see color because I can go to a doctor, because I can get treatment, because I have insurance, because I have, a big boy job, just like yourself. And as a result of those things, I can go get a COVID swab every day.
Was New York not handing out free COVID tests?
I don't know about the COVID tests, but the thing that makes me the most mad about Cuomo is he dangled the rent moratorium over and then failed to provide any. He didn't back the UBI that the World Health Organization recommended. They said we can get this all done and over with in the United States if everybody stays home for 2 months. Give everybody $4,000, tell them to stay home, not worry about it. But with this specifically, you don't have to do that. You can declare, as a governor, you can declare a state of emergency, like what's happening in Texas right now. Right now, Ben is going to get hit, I'm sure, with a power bill 15,000 times higher than he would normally get because of all the outages.
Well,
that's if he had power the whole time.
So I'm not going to get hit with the power bill because I'm just here for a week, just for some training.
Ben, did you get your internet situation figured out? Did I read?
Yeah, I just switched over to use the hotspot on my phone since the Wi-Fi kept kicking me out of the Zoom call.
Okay, gotcha. I don't want to keep shutting you out of the conversation. I just don't know.
No, you're good. That's why I haven't talked a whole lot.
Yeah,
the majority of this is because I have literally caught bits and pieces as you guys have been talking, so I just let y'all run with it.
No, I like to think you're actually just in awe of how articulate I am. That's what I like.
I am blown away.
I mean, that word was 4 syllables. This guy knows what he's talking.
I'm not gonna get hit with the power bill because I'm just here on base for some training. But I have seen, and this is the bullshit that I don't like at all. So Texas is not that great of a state anymore in my eyes, because so this happened, and through multiple failings, politically, really, Texas failed to winterize its power grid and its infrastructure since the last time that something like this happened, which was forever ago. But they failed to do that, and then the Arctic blast, polar vortex, whatever you want to call it, happened and forced the Midwest.
Don't forget they removed themselves from the Eastern power grid.
So they have
the whole thing.
Privatize their own power grid, and in doing so, the companies that are in charge of this privatized power grid know that it's very expensive to update their shit, and so they don't update it unless something breaks. And the majority of this, and this is true for the most of the United States, the most of the power grid is still set up from like the 50s and 60s, and we've moved well past population.
Yeah. After Eisenhower initiated the basic
population. The population has grown exponentially past what the power grid can handle. And Texas having privatized and they're in it now just for the money, don't fix anything unless it breaks, and then they kind of sort of update it a little bit, and they've done fuck all to winterize their shit, which you
can't really blame them for that.
But I can't really blame them for that because it's Texas, and normally Texas doesn't get that cold, and you don't really have to worry about winterizing shoes up. But this is like, that 1 in a million chance where that polar vortex came down and just sat over the Midwest and parts of the South for a week and really just screwed everybody.
And even with the government stepping in, because up here in Omaha, we were getting our power cycled to convert it and send it down to Texas. Now, right. I didn't get hit with it personally. But a lot of my friends did. It was only a night or two, but it'd pull 4 or 5 hours here, 4 or 5 hours there. It's the result of not adequately keeping up your infrastructure because you're privatized. You don't have an incentive to do that. You don't have an incentive to need to have reliable things, and it all comes down to whether or not. When I say, I want to be clear here. When I say a utility, what I mean is that by definition, what I'm talking about is something that most people cannot live without, cannot function in society without. Internet,
power, water.
internet has very recently become one of those as well. That's my personal argument. Some would differ, and that's fine. But water, heat, electricity, police, fire departments. I think we're all on the same page that these things need to be functional. Why are they being driven for profit? What are you talking about? I'm pissed off enough if I get kicked out of a really good Overwatch game I'm in because my power goes out. Let alone if it goes out because I got to bail out a bunch of assholes down in Texas who were just yeehaw. We were making a lot of money, boss.
Yeah, so that's the thing that they continue to do is the majority of the state lost power, and those that still had it utilized it because they were cold as balls. So. And this is just this is an example. I saw a video recently. So in California, and this is pretty high given I think the national average. But in California, it's like 60 to 70 cents a kilowatt hour. That's what they charge for power usage.
Yep.
So for the people in Texas that still had power, some of them were getting charged upwards of $9 to $10 a kilowatt hour because they still had power and were still using it to stay warm and stay alive. So now at the end of a week, their power bill is upwards of $4,000 to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 for a power bill.
And their solution to that,
you wouldn't pay that much in power
in
a year, maybe. Like maybe in a year you would pay that much.
Well, Ben,
we're not paying that much.
Ben, it's supposed to be divided, okay? It's not our fault that the power wasn't being, able to be divided. Oh wait. We didn't update our systems,
it's 100%
and it really is
fault.
100% our fault that the power should have been divided, and now we're just going to charge the normal average Joe because they had power more for the same power.
We're going to place the entire state's average on these 7 people that had power, so we can still get our money.
I have a better idea. The governor takes out his pen, tells him get fucked, and then that's it.
Yeah, but he's
that's
not
the
going
end
to
of
do
the story. But here's what I think is going to happen. This may be prophetic, okay? This may be exactly what happens. This is what I think is going to happen. I think what the Biden administration is going to do is they are going to bail out this energy bill so that liberals get to look at it and feel good about helping the people of Texas. The Texan people don't have to pay this massive bill. I did the rough napkin math on it, too. If it was $60 a day to run your refrigerator while the power was on, if you pay $60 a month in, electric or what have you, and the rates did go up 15,000%, like it has in some areas, that's a $900,000 bill. Their pittance solution to that was we can divide it over 10 years. I got news for you, brother. I don't make $90,000 a year. If I did, I still couldn't afford it. And it's asinine. Liberals are going to look at this. They're going to pass that sort of legislation, and what they're going to do is they're going to do that back-patting, hand-wringing bullshit that they always do. Tell the company to get fucked. Why bail them out? Why is it that anytime something happens in this country to an individual person, you tell them, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're whatever.
Tough shit.
Eat it. And then anytime a company gets in trouble, I guarantee you, like I said, I'm not a politician, but I guarantee you that is exactly how they fucking handle this. They're going to bail out the company.
Alex and I have talked about this before.
And they're going to pretend they're going to do the liberal shit of, oh, look what we did today. We're so good. No, tell them to get fucked. Power's a human.
Right.
That's right.
Alex and I have talked about this before in regards to the 2008 bailout and how the government operated then. Privatized companies came and were like, oh, please, can you help us? And what the government should have done then is what we're telling, what they should do with these power companies now is something tough shit. You're a privatized company. If you can't make it, you can't make it. Sorry. We're not here to bail you out. But because of the way money works and how our government has become now, they're invested. They're in each other's bets, and so they're going to help each other out. And then, like you said, the liberals will look at this as a way to make themselves look good and make themselves look good to the Texan people, so that maybe next time an election comes around, they'll be like, oh, the liberals helped us out, not the conservatives. And then maybe they'll flip the state.
It's beautiful because, it looks like somebody asked Ask him if he plays Mercy. I do. Okay, so I play 3 characters primarily. I'm a Grandmaster's Reinhardt.
Jesus Christ.
I play Mercy to about a Master's level, and then the best DPS I play is probably going to be Reaper or Soldier, but that's barely at gold.
He's too good for us, combo.
No.
If
I'm playing DPS, I'm right there with you. I'm right
see,
there.
We don't need DPS. We need. This is wildly off topic, but we need healers.
Three months ago, I actually cracked top 500 Reinhardt. I ended at 497 for PC.
Insane.
Are you guys speaking English?
Yeah, well, sorry, Combo and I play Overwatch, but we play on PS4. We're always looking for people that actually like play good healers because we both play tanks and we end up carrying the team all the time, and our season rank is reflecting. So, but anyway, that's another topic for another time.
Yeah.
Anyway,
not here.
Yeah, and we never really touched on the whole thing about Cuomo, why he's like in as much trouble as he is now. And
well, okay, so he's in a lot of trouble right now because under investigation for basically just fucking off nursing homes and killing everyone in the nursing homes.
Yeah. And essentially what you were saying, Alex, about like that story with that kid overseas, Cuomo basically authorized or at the very least, at the most generous, did not stop these like COVID rattled nursing homes from accepting more people, but like not letting them out, just putting them essentially in like almost like, I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but if 50, 60, 70% of your nursing home has COVID, you as the governor need to do something about that. Not anyone who's in cannot leave. That's not a quarantine.
And then still stuff other COVID riddled people into there.
Or not even COVID-riddled people, just accept new people into their super spreader. Even.
Yeah, and these are people within society that can't afford to. Yeah, they will die. Like,
yeah, they're the most vulnerable. It'd be like if we were talking about a preschool, we'd be like, not a good look. But I mean, those kids are, they're gonna be fine. Like, not many 4 and 5-year-olds are dying from COVID. But now let's flip that, and that's already like wrong. And now we're talking about 70 and 80-year-olds and above, like the most vulnerable amongst our society. And then when they die, just say, hey, let's not count that as a hospital, or let's not count that as a COVID death. Let's count that as a hospital death. And if you don't, I'm going to end your career and I'm going to come for you. Like, that's the other kind of horrific part about it, is the guy was literally, like, he wasn't threatening people.
He was in a position to save a lot of people's lives with the stroke of a pen, but because he wanted to present the image of New York as a whole handling this well, whilst also being one of the most populous states in the union, of course you're going to be number 2, number 3, number 1 on getting hit by COVID list. Instead of doing and exercising the power that he could and ought to have, he essentially fucked off. And that's insane. There's not a good reason for that other than you don't want to acknowledge, like, liberals do this shit all the time. They consistently identify a problem, and then their solution to it is, we will look into it, we'll create a task force. How about you actually fucking do something? Instead of this liberal hand-wringing bullshit. They do it all the fucking time. That's why people hated Hillary Clinton. That's why people don't like, even people who voted for him don't fucking like Biden. Like, there are only so many times you can hand somebody a saltine cracker and call it a pre-dinner appetizer before they're like, where's my fucking meal, man?
Yeah.
Like, I really genuinely thought that Biden would lose this election and that would be the death blow to the Democratic Party. And instead, they make this promise of, if you overturn the entire state of Georgia, flip those 2 votes so that the Senate has a majority Democrat, we will have $2,000, and elect me president, we'll have $2,000 checks out the door. We are now on day 32 of that. It doesn't look like that's ever going to happen. The Democrats give a pittance. It's like a pauper's pittance, man. They never follow through. because they don't intend to follow through.
No,
They
they
want to
don't.
they want to look not as heartless as Republicans, whilst also doing nothing systemically to change the problem at hand.
No, and I don't want to spend too long on this, so this will be the last note because we still have two other topics we need to get to. But um, uh, uh, going back to your topic of the death blow of the Democratic Party being Trump getting reelected, my hope, and we've talked about this a lot also, is it won't be necessarily the death blow to the Republican or the Democratic Party, but it will more so be the death blow to this two-party system that keeps splitting up 50% of the country to vote for X person and 50% or 51 and 49, whatever, and actually bring somebody forward to where they can really make positive changes and actually
Correct.
live
Yeah.
behind what they say that they're going to do, because now there's more political podcasts than ever. There's more tweets about politics than ever. That's one thing. If you give Trump one thing, it's that he really shined a light on politics because people either loved him or they hated him. And you really didn't run into a single person that was like, Donald Trump, never heard of him, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I've
Donald
actually
Trump is,
heard
is
it.
is a genius at advertising his brand.
Yeah. And
And
I've,
what he did to win the election, and what very well almost won him this last election, was he spoke not to major donors, but he spoke to American people as a populist. It doesn't matter whether or not you specifically voted for Trump. You can't deny that he was the president, and then he was nearly the president again. So if you put 10 people in a room, if we had 100 million Americans that voted and Biden got 60 or 130, whatever have you, the percentage was not off by more than a digit of who did and didn't vote for Trump.
yeah.
So there are a lot of people who Trump's populism and some might argue demagoguery really, really speak to. And that what it speaks to this idea growing within America of like, I did everything right. I went to school. I work hard. I'm a good person. Why is my life just an endless series of bills and disappointments? And what Trump did better than almost anyone in probably 50 years was say, it's not your fault. I would argue his energy was directed in a very aggressive and unsuitable way by blaming mostly immigrants. But you cannot deny that what he and Bernie do at the heart of it is say, look, this two-party system shit, this is bullshit. The Republicans want to the Republicans want to increase our taxes and cut any sort of state assistance, and the Democrats are going to do the same thing, but they're going to put an LGBTQ flag on it. Like, it's just fucking pandering, man. It's fucking pandering.
Amen, dude. Amen.
And
Yep.
I think we're more often than not. I don't usually say it this boldly, but more often than not, I think Republicans are selfish and inept, whereas liberals are cunning and morally backwards. They know exactly what they're doing,
Absolutely.
and that at least the Republican, at least Mitch McConnell will tell me eat shit to my face. Okay, he won't pull a $30 pint of ice cream out of his $50,000 freezer and then tell me, oh, Black Lives Matter investigation. Like, fuck you. God damn. Like, and the older that our generation gets, we're already the biggest voting bloc that exists, and we're not 10-year-old kids anymore.
Yeah.
We are the biggest voting bloc that's there. We're approaching our 30s. The system, all we've ever known in our lifetime is endless war and endless recession, endless calls for austerity measures, endless calls for bootstraps. This system isn't fucking working for us. So you get somebody like Trump to stand up and say, maybe we can fix this shit because we deserve to fix it. You're going to get a lot of fucking votes, man.
Yeah. And with that, Ben, I know you're eager to talk about our next point.
I mean, we can save
Gina
that to the
Carano.
end.
Or do
We
you want
can
to
save
save
that
that
to
to
the
the
end.
end? You want to
Yeah, we'll
touch
save
on?
that to the end.
You
Let's
want to
just move
touch
into
on Rush Limbaugh real quick?
yeah, we'll just touch on Rush's death real fast, and then and go from there.
Yeah, this will be. I know about Gina Carano's tweets and stuff, and I don't know a lot about other than that with her and her life, but I do know about Rush Limbaugh because I used to listen to him a fair amount, and he would say things, and I'd be like, Rush, dude, come on. And then he would turn around and say something. I'm like, yeah, no, that's a pretty good statement. And he, let me just frankly say, has made some not great statements over his career, and he did spend a fair amount of time addicted to prescription painkillers, and I think that's where you really see some of like the craziest, but even or the craziest times of his life. I should finish that sentence. Even in his later years, he started getting into some of like the deep state conspiracy stuff. But he did kind of revolutionize and revitalize AM radio at a certain point in time. And the thing that I always enjoyed listening to about Rush Limbaugh is he would call himself an idiot just as quickly as he would call anybody else an idiot. And when you're on live radio for 40 years or whatever
His
it
show
was,
was at least 3 hours a day.
like I think you're bound to slip up when you're that vocal and that brash, and you're not, he spoke his mind.
Are you
And
arguing? Are you arguing that overall he's a positive figure who made a couple gaffes? Is that what you're kind of arguing?
I would say so for me, he made more than a couple gaffes. He was historically prone to disparaging the gay community, women,
Yeah,
people of color,
I think he's a misogynistic,
more
racist,
more so than he did anything else. And there have been a couple times where he admitted he's like, I do kind of regret saying that.
He's like I don't know.
There wasn't enough remorse in his heart to really get after it. I'll give him credit. He did revolutionize, AM talk radio as it was, it was kind of dying, and he was like one of the main voices that came back and like revitalized it or whatever. But for me, I remember listening to like my dad having Rush Limbaugh on in the car, and for the most part, like
there goes Ben bragging about his having a dad. Cool, dude. Awesome, man.
Damn. No, but like I can remember my dad being in the car when Rush would say something, and my dad would be like, "Shut up, like shut up." Like as a family, we were more right leaning than anything else, but I would consider us as a whole to be more moderate, with right leaning tendencies. But like for me, from what I remember listening to Rush when I was a kid, and all this other stuff, like that dude was a crackpot, and he was so far into like just the conservative wheel and just and maybe that was just part of his gig on his show, but like for me it felt like he never gave credit where credit was due on the other side. It was just like the conservatives are always right. If you're gay, black, a woman, shut up.
What I'd like to point out here is that Rush Limbaugh and Alex Jones exist in the same area, meaning that we know from the divorce documents of Alex Jones's divorce that his wife was like, he's clearly unfit to take care of our children and I want full custody. He had to admit out loud into a court transcript that I play a character on the show. Now, that's true. That's true of a lot of conservative talking heads. It's certainly true of Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, say people like Jordan Peterson.
To interject there just for a second, Rush always claimed that he was the same person on air that he was off air.
I can't bail him out then.
And not saying and I'm not saying that that's not necessarily playing a coy role and saying no, people aren't going to listen to me if I claim that I'm someone different off air, because a lot of people off air God, I'm blanking on the guy's name. Who was the moderator in one of the debates? Chris Wallace.
Yeah, Chris Wallace.
Chris Wallace was actually really good friends with Rush. Aside from interviews and Fox News and so on and so forth.
Tucker Carlson's another one too. You'll see him at the same events that you'll see the Clintons at.
Exactly.
You know?
And I like Chris Wallace. Especially when he was grilling Trump as hard as he was during Trump's presidency and really kind of holding his feet to the fire. Anyway, side story. Chris Wallace said the Rush Limbaugh that you would have dinner with was a lot different, a lot quieter, a lot almost more of a shy guy than what you saw on Rush's radio show. So I just wanted to interject that real quick. But I think he was being more coy than what he let on.
I'm sure. I mean, if the man's smart enough to build that kind of fan base and make that kind of money, there are things that you can push and there are things that you cannot push. So when you are hyperbolic, those people are going to continue to watch you and they're going to watch you more than they would otherwise. The problem with Rush Limbaugh that I have specifically is, I'm trying to just pick one. One of the big ones that I always hated was that he would do that weekly segment and list off the names of people who had died of AIDS that week. And morally, that's disgusting. I could never wrap my head around why you would do that. Like, sure, maybe they're gay. Sure, maybe they're people of color. But like, what are you actually getting at? What's the point? Why do it? Why celebrate it? Unless you're a very cruel man or you're playing the character of a cruel man. But my argument is that there really isn't a separation between the two because you're fanning the flames of that shit. Like all these white supremacist shooters that we've had over the last couple years, like a lot of them will cite like YouTubers by name. Ben Shapiro's been listed, Dave Rubin's been listed, Jordan Peterson's been listed because they aren't necessarily the problem. 12 Rules for Life, one of the books Jordan Peterson wrote that kind of made him a breakout star.
Yep, very familiar.
Not a bad book, but the problem is that because of the algorithms and because of that content holing that people do, it's very easy to get to a point where, and I don't know if this is directly true with Peterson or not, quite frankly, but you essentially hit Nazism at a certain point. You're going to run into it. Stefan Molyneux is a good example. People who, and then you're going to start to hear that leftism as a whole is a Bolshevik Jewish plot.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Yep.
It's a Bolshevik Jewish plot, and we need to come together as Americans.
On the left side,
join together as Americans.
On the left side, you'll get to more of a Marxist ideology of where you have to burn the whole thing down and hashtag eat the rich or whatever. It's like you can even look at like a Tulsi Gabbard or who are some other left-leaning pundits that are like pretty, might have some disagree on policy, because I listen to Ben Shapiro and Jordan B. Peterson a whole lot. Or like a Yang or a Gabbard, or they'll feed you. So it goes back to that same issue of like the algorithms and social media using that to rile people up. But at the end of the day,
if it causes violence, you're accountable.
I mean,
right, and that's what I was going to say when you mentioned those, the shooters that call out, YouTubers that they got their, manifestos from, with the site as the reason for them doing it. So those people have a moral obligation, whether they play a character or not. They have a moral obligation to state, like.
Are we saying that the Gabbards and the Yangs have the obligation, and the Petersons and the Shapiros have an obligation, or the social media algorithms have the obligation?
I would argue you can have both. You can have both.
I would say both. Like if you are in a position of power or influence like that, you have an obligation to the people that are your listeners to say, this is what I'm saying. And I think and I'm trying to figure out how to put this. Maybe Dan can help here in a second. But you have an obligation to put it out there to somehow mitigate some sort of risk or somebody using it as their motivation for going out and committing atrocities.
The problem that exists now is that so Trump did something incredibly innovative that historians will look back on as probably the legacy of his presidency, and that is Noam Chomsky is a philosopher and a social scientist who he wrote a book about. It's called Manufacturing Consent. I highly recommend it. It's a very good book, and it describes the way in which the media collective media accessible to everyone, NPR to Fox News, it's all the same to them. That's what he's talking about. That whole put anything in between, Jacobin all the way to Stormfront. It's all the same. And that in that they are all pushing a political narrative, and Americans didn't really realize that this was happening until we woke up and it was kind of too late. Like you've got people like Glenn Beck who, only was very recently, let go of, who is literally ranting on about how that Bolshevik, Jewish, Marxist, socialist plot to destroy the government is being like BLM is involved in it. Certain members of the anti-fascist movement are involved in it. And like the contempt that I hold for these individuals isn't in that I don't believe they can discern the difference. The contempt I have is that I think they do know the difference. And at a certain point, if I have a platform and I tell everyone on it to go out and literally murder Jewish people, and then that actually happens to a certain degree, civilly. I'm not even talking like civilly or criminally liable, but like morally liable.
If you say the words "go out and murder Jewish people," and then people are murdered who are Jewish, and then you say, well, I didn't murder them, I just told people to do it. Yeah, you should 1,000%.
Yeah, you don't get to throw your hands up and go, how could this have happened?
I think where like the Shapiros and the Petersons get a bad rap is where they do treat normal situations almost like a numerical equation. Right.
And we touched on that earlier. Exactly. I think I was getting to that earlier.
We talked about that earlier. And they never end up into the situation where they want, Ben Shapiro is obviously a Jewish person. Like he wears his yarmulke everywhere. Obviously,
to be fair, Candace Owens is a black woman who actively doesn't want to have the black community.
and I think Candace Owens is another one that I listen to or that I watch a lot. And I don't. If someone can pinpoint a situation where any of those people have said something that have sparked not a riot or anything that has gone to the point where
you want specificity is what you're saying.
Exactly.
You want it beyond plausible deniability.
Anybody could take what I say and say, well, I heard it. We see it in Christianity all the time, where we look at the same verse and people draw different conclusions or different interpretations from that verse, and then they probably go out, and we've seen it in the Bible, use it for violence. And it's like,
well, the thing with that is that nobody takes those.
You have to understand the context and the idea behind the state. You can't just take the words, right? In fact, my girlfriend and I were in a conversation this week about
the Bolshevik Jewish plot to overthrow the United States.
Yeah, no, about using the N-word, obviously not calling a black person the N-word, but saying it in a rap lyric if you're white, right? She was singing along to a song at work.
Sure.
And said the word with the lyric, and somebody was like, hey, you can't say that. Coincidentally, the person was white. And she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, obviously, I'll never do it again. I just, it slipped, whatever." The context behind in which she was using it was much different than if you just went home and said, "Could you believe that this white girl at work said Nigga?"
Yeah, no,
Like
no,
you
I
can't,
completely get that.
you can't,
Context is key. But if we're
yeah,
looking
and
at context, we got to look at narrative.
absolutely.
If you perpetuate the same narrative over and over and over again over a series of years, that your girlfriend saying that, while it might be a social faux pas, she can still continue to do that with very little consequence, other than people are going to be like, she sucks. Like, what I'm talking about is like slowly building the big lie, as Goebbels would call it, or building the other. And what a lot of these people have done, and I really don't think it, like, I really don't think that they're so smart, right? I really don't think they're so dumb that they don't see it. These people are worth millions of dollars. I don't really buy it. I don't buy that Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson don't say things to their base that are like, that could be like super misconstrued. Like, what white conservative men more often than not want to hear is, "You're absolutely correct." That's just true. It's the same for fucking liberals, which is how you end up with like Rachel Maddow still on the fucking air. Like, the problem is the echo chamber. The whole point. It's funny we're talking about that, because like that was the whole point of this conversation. Is like, you can go in either direction, but if if you can go in either direction, but as of this juncture, as of this present time, only one side of that equation has resulted in a couple dozen mass murders of the other.
Speaking as far as citing like a Ben Shapiro or a Jordan Peterson type figure, is that the
Yeah,
conclusion?
what I'm
Okay.
saying is that over the last 4 years, since the whole anti SJW YouTube trend or what have you, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, Candace Owens, and I would say Jordan Peterson to a certain extent, they're very good at debating. They are. I'm not going to take that away from them. They're good at playing the game. But what I'm getting at is you sounding smart to a bunch of teens because of your YouTube videos, that can perpetuate violence if the topic that you're debating is something such as, like, Black Lives Matter is a terrorist movement, or anti-fascists are the real fascists. Like, that can not only, because not only in the West do we suffer from historical illiteracy, essentially, we also suffer from being an empire that people just don't seem to, in our situation in the West here, we're not we're not willing to hear that, accept that, or learn about that. We just take it as it is, at face value. And when you basically, our problem comes from our national identity is that of a conqueror, but our national situation is very bad economically. How do we fix this? And most people would come to the conclusion that we need to either reform capitalism, or we need to expand social safety nets, create new government union jobs, well-paying jobs. Some people take that and turn it on its head and say, the reason the reason your boss sent your job to Mexico is because the labor's cheaper. That's a very different conversation than just outright calling Mexican refugees and immigrants rapists and criminals. It's
Yeah, and
that rhetoric is supremely important,
yeah,
because you
absolutely.
can have an honest conversation about it,
But
but not
let
when you're demonizing the other. Because, like we learned in Crystal Knock, the march on the Capitol, these things have real consequences. The Blue Lives Matter crowd killed 2 fucking cops. Like, are we not going to talk about
Well, yeah, and
like
I would,
you know what I mean by that? Like we
and
now need to pump the brakes and like talk as a nation about what the fuck is acceptable and what isn't.
I would argue also that anybody that was truly Blue Lives Matter obviously would not have beaten two cops to death. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. I don't know the two people personally. I don't know who they followed on Facebook or whatever. But I would argue that anybody that would claim to care about cops' lives would not go out and assassinate cops. But to get back to the point, to play devil's advocate, just to wrap this up, like with the Shapiros and the Petersons being responsible for, conclusions drawn about what they have said, we could then justify the fact that the Black Lives Matter campaign managers should all be held accountable for all the looting, rioting, and burning buildings that happened throughout many cities throughout the nation, which, in fairness to I'm playing devil's advocate, I don't think that necessarily should be the case. But using that same logic, the very leaders that have come out and said that they identify with Marxist, ideologies, we should be able to hold them. If we're going to put a Ben Shapiro or a Jordan Peterson in jail for what their followers have done, those people should be right along with them.
And I would agree with that if there were a single death attributed to the Black Lives Matter movement over the last summer.
Dan, my friend, you know that
if you're talking about police running over protesters with their cars times.
No,
but
or
in terms
police
of
officers being gunned down in New York as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement, or black, and again, I don't care what your skin color is, Black Lives Matter supporters blocking entrances for those same police officers that were just gunned down in the street because they don't think they should be allowed to get to the hospital. And then when the police officers do get to the hospital, they're trying to get up to their rooms because they want to check on them, and they're like, hey, friends and family only. They're like, no, we just want to check on them. And they're like making TikToks and shit after police officers get shot. I mean, that's a pretty direct correlation if we're going to start putting people in jail because of the followers.
And there was two deputies out in California that got gunned down in the same type of way and had to go and went to the hospital, and people were trying to do the same type of shit. So there's definitely been,
and that's directly related to protesting of the police.
Within days,
they had attributed themselves as part of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Correct.
Okay, so like upon arrest, like a manifesto, that's what I'm asking. Is like they're documenting. I don't know if it
was like a manifesto or anything, but they at some point verbally.
I killed a cop because blue lives don't matter. I support BLM.
Black Lives Matter.
That's what I'm asking.
For us to rise up. Exactly. Yeah. Type in tweets.
Okay.
I can't.
Yeah, in very simplified terms.
I'd be very interested to see that. To my knowledge, as someone who in Omaha has been a part of it, has been a part of the Nebraska Left Coalition.
It's not in Omaha. I'm talking New York. There was, I believe.
No, that's what I mean. Is I would like to do a dive on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I don't know enough about it to rebuttal it, and so therefore,
and one
if
thing,
if that is indeed the case, then that certainly is a problem.
One thing, definitely. Dan, that I'm learning more and more as we chat is that how dangerous, because again, you've said things that I'm like, I wasn't aware of that, and I've said a couple things that you weren't aware of, and we both strive to not live in an echo chamber where we hear the same things over and over. We both want what's best for the common good of humanity. But
yeah, I'm not here because I'm the guy with the answers.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Again, the whole point of us having this conversation was to get out of the echo chamber. And as we continue to chat, I'm continuing to realize how important it is to have civil conversations with people that may not agree with us or may have different ideas than us, and actually sit down and be able to chat and say, hey, I don't know it all. You don't know it all. But together we can be better. And we still might not agree, and that's okay. But anyway, I just had to throw that in there real quick because
No, certainly it's a nice change of pace from. Because I've always you know me, you've known me a long time. I've always despised that you're so smart. Pat, that back patting bullshit.
yes, Queen.
Yeah,
Yes, Queen.
I fucking hate it, man. It's the worst. It's like, do you not like or why would you want to live in that world instead of reality, man? Like
Yeah.
you can affect reality, like all of us together can affect reality. But what I was saying about Trump earlier is what you can't overlook, what you can never possibly overlook, that historians are going to look back on as the legacy of his presidency is the invention of and a lot of this ties into what like the violence that has been committed more than almost any other single thing is alternate realities where fake news things can be fake news where I don't like what you're saying, it's not true. Like we've seen this play out before. There are empirical things that do or don't happen. Dates do exist. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And I think the worst part about fake news is that fake news isn't always fake news anymore. It's lies with a hint of truth. Just
Correct.
enough
It's
truth,
just plausibly deniable enough to not be a lie.
just enough
barely.
truth to have some hints and some traces to the truth, but just enough narrative to get people to where we want them to think and how we want them to think. And that's fucking dangerous. That's a dangerous ideology to fall into because you get people who are the quote unquote fact checkers and say, well, no, he's telling the truth because he said X, Y, and Z. Well, A, B, C, D, E, F, G was all bullshit. So can we look at that? Anyway, we gotta keep on moving here to our last topic because I don't want to short Ben on his Mandalorian
Yeah, Ben's been
girl.
so patient. Ben's been so patient.
When Ben, so you've watched before, obviously, Dan. Ben is typically like the moderator and doing all the behind the scenes stuff, but he's had to stay quiet, and I feel bad. I miss you, Ben.
No, it's fine.
I didn't mean to take over your podcast, guys.
No,
It's the Wi-Fi stuff,
that's not even that's not even the thing. No, it's totally fine, and it's definitely it's good. It's good because sometimes I get on a roll and I just talk a whole bunch, and people tell me to shut up. So this was your opportunity to see me shut up for a little while. So our last topic, and this is what I kind of been itching to get after because this topic has always pissed me off to no end since its inception, is cancel culture. And so one of the most recent victims of cancel culture has been Gina Carano, who, for all you Star Wars nerds out there, she plays the rebel drop trooper from The Mandalorian, and she has historically been known as a more right-leaning individual, but she doesn't back down from her beliefs, and she has been under scrutiny from Disney for it before, but this was probably the last straw for all of it. So recently, she put out a few tweets and a couple of an Instagram story, and what she did, I think the thing that really got her and what everybody else really started the hashtag Fire Gina Carano about was the fact that she had a post on Instagram. It was a Jewish woman running away from men with clubs in Ukraine in 1941, and her caption underneath that, I'm trying to simplify it down, was she was saying that it didn't start with the Nazis rounding up the Jews during World War II. It started with the government, the Nazi government, putting that fear into their neighbors and their neighbors ratting them out, basically. And then she went on to kind of equate that to the political climate.
She put it with the Ermo poem that, first they came for the communists. I did not speak out because I'm not a communist. Then they came for the labor union leaders, but I didn't speak out. And then you get to the end, and then they came for me, but there's nobody left to speak out for me. I think that's what you're saying. Because I'm not personally familiar with it, but I think that's what it's referencing.
Yeah,
was that the intention?
I feel she had equated the fact that it was your neighbors it was the Jewish people's neighbors that ratted them out first, and that turned on them first, before the government did, which in turn made it easier for the government to step in and do their thing. And I don't think that was the be all end all. She wasn't saying that the government's going to step in and start rounding people up. But what she was equating that to was the fact, and she said this in her Instagram story, was the fact that, she related it to our political climate now, where people are just at each other's throats at all times for differing political views, and they can't sit down and do what we've done this whole time and have a civilized conversation. And at the end of it, go, all right, cool, let's go grab a beer or something. All right, so that was her gist behind it, but nobody got that gist behind it. Everybody took that and spun it as her saying, her equating conservatives to modern day Jews, and the left was coming after us, or us, or conservatives, or whatever you want to say. Like that was people's spin on it. So then they started this whole fire Gina Carano thing, which Disney listened to, and they ended up firing her. So she's no longer going to be a part of the Mandalorian.
Which just to provide a little bit, I didn't know this about her personally. She was an ex-MMA fighter.
She's an ex-MMA fighter,
and she's been outwardly spoken as a conservative since basically she was an MMA fighter. So there was already a little bit of fuel in the tank there for left-leaning individuals to come after her.
Right, exactly. And there was a video my brother shared with me. That's basically, she's been the type of person that the video is called "The Girl That Never Backed Down" or whatever. So given her MMA background past, and her
you said she's just wait a minute. You said she's just been approved for that. The Girl Never Back Down. Like that's a project that's gonna happen now.
No. It was.
There's something she's doing. There's something she's doing with the Daily Wire, if I remember correctly.
And that's in the article that I have pulled up. Her agency dropped her, and the Daily Wire. She's working on something with the Daily Wire. But this was just a video that my little brother shared with me when he brought this up to me. It was something along that lines of the YouTube video, the title like that. But basically, it was just a quick overview of her life that was like, she's always been the type of person that stands by her guns, stands by her beliefs, no matter what she says. And if you don't like it, then, pretty much like, sorry, but not sorry. So her and her co-star, Pedro Pascal, who plays the Mandalorian, have differing viewpoints, political viewpoints. But they, and they both have misstepped on social media before. Pedro's done some missteps here and there. He openly put out Ted Cruz's office number on Twitter or something.
My favorite was Ted Cruz on the anniversary of 9/11, accidentally retweeting a Johnny Sins stepmom porno, and he just, I don't know how an intern got a hold of that. Ted, I know how you got a hold of that.
We now know how Ted gets down.
Yeah, we're like, yeah.
But so everybody called out for in firing of Gina Carano and not Pedro Pascal and all this other stuff. But the be all end of it is that Gina and Pedro have different political viewpoints, but they looked at each other and said, we can differ, but we can still be friends. That was perfectly fine. Disney didn't give a fuck what Pedro said, because Pedro is a little bit more of a left-leaning individual, which Disney kind of lines up more with that. So Gina said some things that were in her personal belief in her wheelhouse, and Disney didn't like it, so they turned their guns on her.
So essentially, just so I'm following here, so Gina posted a tweet that some could argue because I purposely actually did not look this up. I didn't want to know what it was. Because I wanted to hear from you guys what it was, and we could discuss, how do my politics affect that. So just so we're on the same page, from my understanding, she tweeted something that some might misconstrue as corollary to the Holocaust,
right.
whilst a more left-leaning individual that she worked with tweeted something. I don't quite see that third jump.
He basically
that was just basically saying so. The correlation there is that they both said things on social media that people haven't agreed with, but there's kind of, I guess you would say, like a double standard. Is that her co-star, who's a more left-leaning individual, essentially got away with
I see.
saying what he said because of his politics, but Gina didn't get away with what she said, and then they all came after her and went to cancel her because she was a more conservative, a more right-leaning individual.
Well, and I know that this isn't a fair question for Dan because he just said he hasn't looked at it, which I
No, I want to go off of it based on.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
That everything else I have a pretty good grasp on. We could talk for hours and hours on all that.
But
this specifically, the social ramifications, I knew of what had happened. I didn't know the specifics, and I thought it would be more productive if I came in without knowing what it was, and you guys can explain it to me, and then I can actually be a more fair judge of how I feel about the situation if I'm hearing it for the first time.
Absolutely. And what I would want from anybody that thinks that Gina Carano really should have been fired, I want them to show me specifically what she said in any of her tweets, because I went and I read them all, and I'm like, okay, like, seems like kind of a right-leaning person. I see the ties that she's making. The left calls people on the right Nazis all the time. Hell, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez said that Ted Cruz tried to have somebody kill her in the Senate or in the storming of the Capitol, which is like
she blamed Ted Cruz for fanning the flames that led to the escalation that would have. And I think we're all smart enough to not have to mince words here. Yeah. That we're all very aware of. I mean, they had zip ties, they had guns. If they could have gotten a hold of AOC, she'd be fucking dead.
Yeah, but it's not like Ted Cruz put a hit out on AOC like she was trying to make it sound.
Yeah, but fucking Ted Cruz doesn't get to wake up in the morning and go, "How could this have happened?" Well, and then the rest of us go, "Wow, that escalated slowly and steadily for 4 fucking years." I agree with
that, but anyway, going back to the Gina situation, it's like this isn't the first time someone from a highly acclaimed position has made a comment that it's like, okay, come on. And I didn't even really think that with Gina's tweets, quite honestly. I would really like to know the specific verbiage that she used that would justify her getting fired. But anyway,
it wasn't anything. It was just, so what it was, and from my understanding of researching it, it was just a bunch of, and I'm gonna generalize here, it's a bunch of left-leaning people felt that they were being attacked by her or didn't agree with her political views, and they were like, "How dare you?" And this was the main one, was the Holocaust one. They were just like, "How dare you equate right-leaning individuals or conservatives to Jews, and that we are the Nazis and we're coming for you." Like, they were just super butthurt about that whole thing, which wasn't her connotation behind it at all. I don't feel like that was her connotation behind putting out what she put out. So they were like super pissed off about that, and they started a trending hashtag on Twitter that was "Fire Gina Carano." Disney took notice of it, went and looked, at all of her stuff, and they've had their eyes on her for a long time, according to her, and also according to Gina's, she felt that she's been bullied by Disney a lot, and that through that and some other things, they were trying to pull her and Pedro Pascal apart as friends. So Disney took notice of all of that, and then they, to calm the masses and make sure that their profit margins didn't get hurt on Disney Plus and on The Mandalorian, because that's one of the flagship shows for that platform. They fired her.
Ben, to further justify the double standard idea, one of our comments from Wade says, Disney still employs an animator who created and shared a cartoon on Twitter about putting a MAGA supporter in a wood chipper.
Right, and so that's what I was getting at earlier. Is Disney has historically been more left-leaning than anything else.
Oh, you're not going to hear an argument out of me that Disney is not a liberal-leaning institution.
It's basically like, and they're people don't want to say, but they're a large monopoly. They have a large monopoly on a lot of different aspects in the entertainment industry, from ESPN to news networks, and so they have quite a lot of pull. And if you don't agree with them or don't like what they're doing, they're going to put the squeeze on you, or they're just going to can you.
So let's for the sake of argument, based on everything you guys have told me, let's assume that it was in jest, right? and it might have been gross, and it might have been an equivalency that shouldn't have been made. Should that lead to you getting fired? My answer to that would be that's up to the discretion of your employer. Like, if you're a public figure and you say shit that can be misconstrued into being something that the general pop doesn't like, then to a certain degree you're responsible for your demise. However, what I would say to that as well would be that here's what I will say, okay? So liberal Twitter, blue checkmark Twitter, as we call it on the left, is a fucking nightmare. It's a bunch of LARPing goddamn losers who like to pat themselves on the back and get people kicked off of TV, get them kicked off their shows. They love that shit. You know what they don't like? Doing systemic work to change the world to make it a better place. They love Twitter.
They just love ruining
love,
people's lives.
They do enjoy that, and to a certain degree, I you know, it's so funny. I don't think I said it before, but I actually I disagree with conservatives, but I despise liberals because liberals know what they're doing. Conservatives sometimes reach the wrong juncture, but it's usually with good intention. It's usually under the guise of lower taxes, more freedom, you know, to that extent. Unless it's like a Trumpian issue about like kick the rapists out of here. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a situation like this where, from what you're telling me, she tweeted something that could have possibly been misconstrued as comparing victims of quote unquote cancel culture with the Holocaust. I mean, I'm sure that we can agree that's probably distasteful.
That's not exactly what it was. It was more her comparing socialism to Nazism, or socialism to what led to Hitler's rise. Let's put it that way. Which Hitler was a socialist, and
real quick. So, the National Socialist Party is where we derive what fascism is. What Hitler did, and a lot of people don't necessarily. So when I went to school for, Alex. So I studied political science and I studied history. I ended up finishing with psychology. But a big problem in modern day America is, and the reason there's such a bad taste in people's mouths about socialism is directly correlated to the fact that the Nazis established a populist movement like Trump did, and then they provided, I will say this, they did provide certain state-sponsored work programs. It was the Great Depression. They did a New Deal in the same way that FDR did, but FDR is no more than a socialist than Hitler was. The hallmarks of fascism by Umberto Eco. Yeah, Umberto Eco. He details and outlines the 10 major components of fascism. One of the components that made fascism successful within Nazi Germany was that they hijacked a populist movement that was initially left-leaning. The problem here, though, is that when you go to the root of it, what happens is that when capitalism fails, like it is currently failing, people need something. They need a life raft. They need something. I'm sure the three of us are doing relatively well. I don't have anything to complain about. But the problem is that when neoliberalism fails and capitalism fails, someone has to fill that power void. And you're usually going to get one of two options. You're either going to have socialism, which is a state-dictated economy, or you end up with fascism, which is capitalism on steroids. That's what the Nazis ended up having. So when you say Hitler was a socialist, that's like saying that all Blue Bunny ice cream is blue. It's a direct misinterpretation.
I don't think that was the point of her tweet. And Ben, you can probably
I was responding to you specifically, Alex. That was it. Hitler was not a socialist. That's what that's the only thing I was talking about.
Gotcha.
Right,
yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
No, I think the entire point behind her, and I think it was an Instagram story. I think the entire point behind it was was the fact that she was trying to tell everybody that, let's not be at each other's throats over different political opinions. That's not helpful. It's not constructive. It's not what we need to be doing to each other right now. And I think to keep going on that, I think the other part of it was that she was saying that it could lead to something like your neighbors. If it gets to an excessive point, your neighbors could be the ones that come.
You make a hyperbolic bullshit tweet.
Yeah.
I mean that's fine and that's good.
So Go ahead.
What
I'm trying to get at is that I don't feel that her Disney as her employer should have that much control over what she tweets.
Well, and if
if she wants to tweet out something that's like her personal political or belief set, and that's fine, but you don't get to fire somebody over because a group of people on Twitter got pissed off about it.
The problem, I think, is
you can't let the masses dictate, how. But yeah, who is paying you for it? But the fact that that was just her own personal political or personal beliefs, and everybody got pissed off about it and created a trending hashtag for it. And then Disney was like, "Oh shit, there goes our profit margin."
I'm not saying she should go ahead, Alex.
I was just gonna. No, you're fine. I think like what Dan said earlier. Your company has a right to decide whether or not they want to keep you employed based on anything. Most states are right to work these days. I cannot like the way that you tie your shoes in the morning and have a legal right to fire you. But then again, Disney should come out and say, okay, if you're a conservative or if you're a Republican, then don't even bother applying with us, because the minute you come out and support right-wing policies or Trump or, anything right-leaning, then we're going to fire you. And your co-actor, who happens to be male, because we don't hear about the female justice warriors in this particular situation, where, again, you have a left-leaning cast member and you have a right-leaning cast member. And coincidentally, the male, which I don't think that should make a fucking difference at all, but other people would disagree with me, has come out and made tweets supporting left-leaning agendas. And now his cast member, who happens to be a female conservative, comes out and tweets things supporting right-leaning her views, and one is fired and the other isn't. You're creating a complete double standard that shouldn't exist. Or you should come out and say, if you want to apply to work and to shoot with us and to be hired within our films or our series, you should be a conservative, or you should be a liberal or a Democrat. And conservatives do not apply.
Yeah, and Metters is right here in the chat. He said Disney loves strong, independent women as long as they vote blue.
Exactly.
Which is true. So as soon as you have a strong, independent woman that's voting red, now they have a problem. And now she's no longer employed by Disney.
I mean, it depends on the narrative that you're trying to push, certainly. I would say that getting fired for a gaffe like that, although I might not personally agree with it, the trade-off for fame and fortune is that you are accountable to the public. So if a lot of people view your tweet and they view it as anti-Semitic, your intention actually is now kind of backseat. Anti-Semitic or seems to make light of the Holocaust, and that's how most people read it. Although by the author's design, it wasn't meant to be taken that way. The consequences are kind of the same, man. It's not really that different than if I said an off-color joke at the bar and my friends left me there. Like there's a social consequence to be paid, and that's not really Disney's fault. Although they are the ones firing them, which I do understand is kind of a little bit of a. It seems like a paradox, but it's not. It seems like a paradox because, well, her only problem is being conservative. Well, that's not the case, because she didn't get fired for saying that we need to lower state taxes. She didn't get fired for saying we should lower capital gains tax. She didn't get fired for saying we should have a more expeditious route to immigration. She said something, from what you guys are telling me, she made a bad personal call and perpetuated an image that, although might not have been her intention, I mean, that kind of falls on you as the individual. I'm never going to get fired because my company looks at my Twitter and thinks maybe this guy is denying, or maybe this guy is equating the Holocaust with X, Y, or Z. Like, do you understand what I mean by
Yeah,
that? Like,
exactly.
Yeah, and I get it. And she, she's since come out and said, obviously that it wasn't, in the best taste for her to put that out, and the post has since been deleted. All that, obviously retroactive and
but we
not,
should.
it's the damage has been done. But my thing is I'm getting at is that people just common sense is uncommon nowadays, and people just fly off the handle at the first thing that upsets them without really taking a minute to think about it and look at it and go, oh, okay, maybe
And if we're gonna fire,
what did she actually mean?
the era of plausible deniability is gone. I'll agree with you there, Ben.
If we're gonna fire her over those tweets
Hey,
and statements,
I'm gonna start using that.
yeah, tweetments. You heard it here first, copyrighted.
Your tweetment, sir.
Then
2021,
Disney,
What in the World podcast.
There you go. Then
Tweetments.
Disney should absolutely fire the animator who created and shared a cartoon on Twitter about a MAGA supporter being put in a wood chipper. We can all agree that that's vastly more brash and
it's in
not
horrible
good
taste
and in horrible taste. Talking about sparking the idea of literally killing someone on the other side of you because of who they support. It's just such a double standard, and it's been, in my opinion, reverberated throughout all of these constant cancel culture movements where we cancel either the white male or the person who's a Trump supporter or anybody on the right. And on the left, we just kind of, on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, maybe not Facebook. Facebook's pretty red these days. But we give a pass to all these people on the left who are making the same brash, crazy statements. And again, not any of us sitting here, because I wouldn't say put fucking Dan Hoppins in a wood chipper. Damn it, that liberal. And Dan
if you called me a liberal, I would personally come fist fight. I'll lose. But
and Dan wouldn't say, well, Alex votes on the right, so he should lose his job. I mean, it's crazy that it's such. Dan has used the word a few times tonight, and I love it. The pandering to the entire
it's just backpatting,
audience.
hand-wringing bullshit.
And it all goes back to monetization. If being right on the right, if voting for Trump was cool and hip and trendy with young kids, guess who Disney would be backing? Trump. But everybody, right now on the left had a great target within Trump, who is a slimy, gross old bastard. And it's like, okay, that's the cool, young, hip thing to do right now is vote anti-Trump. So what does that mean? I'm on the left. It's a double standard.
Yeah, it is. And my thing is, cancel culture has just been, ticking me off to no end because from its inception or since it started, because people are getting canceled for things that happened 10, 15 years ago. That just
the one that comes to mind is. I think it was Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart made an off-color tweet back in 2009, and then he didn't get a host the Emmys for it or whatever. What I'm getting at is that kind of stuff is it's just pandering bullshit. That's all it is.
Exactly.
Firing this gal based on, again, like I said, I didn't know anything about it before you brought it up, but firing this gal based on an off-color tweet, that's probably not a good call. But
right, and the thing is just nobody realizes anymore that people are people and people make mistakes. And yes, you might be a high profile individual, and yes, you might have you have a bigger moral obligation and a bigger responsibility to society to do your best, if not better, because of where you are in a position of influence. But people are people, and they're gonna make mistakes. And what bugs me the most about cancel culture is that nobody gets a chance to make a mistake anymore. You don't get it. It's just immediate, bam, you're done. Sorry. And you're like, well, hold on a minute. If you did the exact same thing that I did, and cancel culture came after you, you'd be super pissed.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, what, why do I get fired from my job? I just made a mistake. And it's like, well, yeah, you made a mistake, and so did this person. You made the same mistake. So why can't they get a second chance?
Well, because
if you
it's
deserve
not,
a second chance.
okay, so militantly advocating for Medicare for all isn't the same as being misconstrued into like Holocaust analogy. Like it's not quite the same. There was a question in the chat I wanted to answer. It's from Squash. He goes, if it's not okay to call trans people by their original name, then why is it okay to drag up tweets from years ago in order to cancel people? Now, that's it. And then he also posits that might be, or he, she, them, they.
It's my little brother, so yeah.
Okay. Okay. So he also, says, maybe it's a false equivalency, but it's an interesting argument I've heard. So the reasoning behind that, the reason you don't call a trans person. So I personally have a couple trans friends, more than the national average. Like by and large, due to my work with Nebraska Left Coalition, Omaha Tenants United, the leftist groups that I am in, I understand that I'm exposed to it more. The problem with it is, so that the term for it is called dead naming, and what you're doing is if someone comes out and identifies as a different gender or as non-binary, and they ask to be called a new name, just out of general fucking respect. If my name is Richard and I asked and you called me Dick and I said please don't call me Dick, call me Richard, and you insisted on calling me Dick, you're making me mad. You're pissing me off, first off. But more importantly, you are telling that person in that statement, you are telling that person that your identity isn't valid to me. And whether or not that's true, because I'm sure it's been said a billion, we live in a society. We do live in a society, and social currency is currency. You don't get to fucking treat people that way. That would be like if you had a BIPOC, like a friend of color, and you called them a Kunta Kente. That joke might last one time, and then you get your ass kicked. So, the reason the reason they're different is because tweets that were said from somebody a couple years ago, perhaps they're not relevant, and of course I would say they're worth examination for context. If it was a bad joke, it's a bad joke. We can move on. I agree with that there. But that's why we don't call trans people their original names, because what you're doing, whether you agree with it or not, is you're invalidating someone's identity, and we don't do
right.
It's general.
And Alex and I have said many times that
I was just answering the question. I just
right. Yeah. No. I get you. And we said many times we don't have a problem with that. Like if you walked up to me and said, "Hey, my pronouns are she, he, she, and her," or whatever, all right, fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'll call you, like, if you're trans or anything like that, and you were, you wanted to be identified as a female, then that's fine. I'll respect you as a person and do that for you.
Yeah, it costs no money.
It costs me nothing.
It costs no money to call someone the pronoun they choose.
And like you said, to continue to not do that shows that you just could give a fuck less about that person as a person.
Yeah, to continue to not is at that point a personal insult, and it's arguably like violent to deny somebody's identity.
It's basically verbal abuse.
I would say that, like, not a crime. I want to be clear. It's not a crime.
Right.
What I'm saying is that any social capital that you lose as a result of doing that, you deserve to lose. If Alex needed to go by, if Alex, came out and wanted to go by Alexandria, that's what you do now. Okay? It's not like it's part of just being a good fucking person.
It's just nice. It's just being respectful.
Support people.
Just be nice.
And if you're not here on the same page as me about supporting people, and instead you want to debate people's own identity with them, then my brother, we are going to have our hands are going to change some words.
Well, it wouldn't matter if that same person, converted to Judaism and was like, now my name is not Peter, it's
Or with
Yassine
Islam,
Ray or whatever.
often people, with
Who
Islam,
cares,
people
right?
often change
I
the
mean,
name.
like, cool, man. That's what you're into right now, so whatever.
I think Malcolm X's original name was like Franklin Smalls or something like that.
Just be nice to people. There was another question in here that was directed towards you, Dan. It said, so this was a while back, and I promised this person we would get back to it. So would you say that Ted Cruz had to bear some responsibility for the Capitol riot and violence?
Oh, absolutely. Most certainly. Ted Cruz, by design, along with senators like Ben Sasse, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, they perpetuated the idea that, and let's not be confused here. Joe Biden won when the first ballots were cast on election day. Whether those needed to be counted or not,
and to save
it's a story being told in reverse.
To save you,
it's not a story of Trump slowly losing the election to mail-in ballots. It's the ballots are just getting counted.
To save
Trump
you
lost
from
day
that,
one.
To save you from that justification, just so you don't have to go over it, we had an election day podcast. We basically, very similar to Rogan's podcast, I was actually listening to it at the time, talking about how the mail-in ballots are still going to be coming in. There's going to be a large number of Biden. So no one in here thinks that like the election was rigged or stolen or anything like that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for catching me up to speed on that.
Yep.
So yeah, like I said, it's a story being told in reverse, yet all these congressmen and women who were, for whatever reason, still supporting the president of the United States was on TV and on Twitter day and night for almost 2 months talking about how the election was stolen and it's rigged and you hardworking Americans are getting stolen from. You chose me. Everybody knows it. We all know it. And we need to do something about it. And then they scheduled the riot, or they scheduled the speech from Trump himself on the 6th. And then the end of that speech with this giant rally outside of the Capitol basically culminated in Trump saying we should take our democracy back, and then he walked away from it. And then the Capitol riots happened, and then a riot, insurrection, whatever you'd like to call it, whatever. That happened. A couple people died, like storming the Capitol building. And one of the primary drivers of that were people like Ted Cruz, people in positions of power and authority who were saying, it's a cover-up. It comes in all the way back to the big lie that we talked about at the start of the conversation. It all comes back to the plot. There's always a plot, right? There's always some grand mechanistic scheme to keep us, the people, from truly being in power. Now, Ted Cruz, I do not believe, is stupid enough to not understand what the three of us understand about the election's a story being told backwards. He won on day one. Like, whether we like it or not, Biden's the fucking president. But Ted Cruz spending the next 5 weeks fanning those flames until people were armed and stormed the Capitol to stop the electoral voting count. Yes, you are culpable. You're absolutely culpable in that.
So
don't get to the next day. You don't get to get on Twitter and go, "Oh my God, how could this have happened?" Like, to me, it's like I'm living in an alternate reality.
I'm gonna keep all of my personal rebuttals out of that and just go off of what that same commenter said, and said, then does Bernie Sanders have the same responsibility for the shooting of Steve Scalise? If not, what is the difference? I'm
gonna be honest with you there, Luke. Full disclosure, Luke. I am not aware of the Steve Scalise shooting. I wouldn't feel comfortable making a comment on it. I don't have the knowledge of that.
I wish I could fill you in, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Ben, do you have a rundown of it?
Congressman Steve Scalise.
What happened with Steve
Scalise? Wait. Is Steve Scalise the guy who was he the congressman who was shot like while they were like doing softball practice? like by
Yes,
like a left-wing anarchist. Is that the
yes,
guy?
you're
Am
right.
I remembering that right?
You're right. Yes.
Yeah, that sounds
is
about
him.
right.
I don't know that 100%, but I'm about 99.5%. Yep. That's correct. Shot during the GOP
God,
softball game or whatever.
look how fucking smart I am, man. I'm nailing this shit.
I still think you're wrong about Ted Cruz for the record, but that's fine. I love you. Continue.
Anyway, so the only reason those two things wouldn't be directly related is because, again, you can't. It's a false equivalency to state that advocating for Medicare for all and advocating that the worth we produce as a society is not being adequately distributed amongst us. That's not the same as planting a conspiracy theory that somehow your country is being stolen from you, attempting to organize and incite violence, storming the Capitol, and then killing a couple Capitol police and a couple protesters.
So
what I will say though, is that so they're not equivalent, but is that shooting in any way, shape, or form related to Bernie Sanders? Because if I remember correctly, the shooter was, I believe, an anarchist. That would be an interesting take. That would be a hard take for me to take based on the fact that Bernie Sanders is barely a social democrat. He's not so let me clear this up for you guys real quick. So when we talk about the left colloquially, we're talking about two different things. Like the three of us are talking about two different things. So the left, like the left, capital L, the left, that is the section of the scale that seems to be missing. Because if you are to the right of that, you still support capitalism, meaning that on that spectrum, Bernie Sanders would be left of center for sure, because he does want nationalization of certain key industries. He does want Medicare for all. He does want to go ahead and try to consolidate some of the national debt behind like tariff makeups. But all of these things exist within the confines of capitalism. The problem is the left, the left, where I am at personally, is that I do not believe that capitalism as a system can pan out, because it inevitably reaches an end goal where it has to collapse in on itself. And just like it did in Japan, and just like it did in Germany, and just like it did in France, and just like it did in the UK, eventually people get fed up and they revolt, and they always go one of two ways. They always go to socialism, and we get, the USSR, the Soviet Union, or they go to the right, and then we get things like phalangelist Spain, Indonesia, Italy, Bulgaria, Germany. Like you basically either go socialist or you go fascist, and both of those things are a direct byproduct of capitalism's failure. It's utter failure to meet the needs, and the government, that specific government's inability to rein that shit in and get it dealt with. As far as if he worked for Sanders did strongly condemn the actions, though. Yeah, I would say that's more of a. I mean, okay, so do you guys remember, Ben, Alex? Do you guys remember a couple years ago? Forget the gentleman's name, but the guy was a leftist. He's an anarchist leftist. He goes to that ice camp out in Colorado, and he went with a bunch of guns, a bunch of bombs, and his plan was to destabilize all the vehicles, breach the perimeter, and essentially like break the ICE refugees out of this camp. Do you guys remember that a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
He got killed. He got killed doing it, but he didn't fire a shot at anybody there. Like after he disabled a couple of vehicles, he was killed. But I would say if something like that were done and Sanders were affiliated with it, then maybe we're getting to the equivalency of what Ted Cruz's role is in the Capitol insurrection.
Sanders was directly affiliated with the guy who shot Steve Scalise. And I'm not, to be clear, I don't think that Bernie Sanders should be held accountable for some loon going out and shooting Steve Scalise on a softball field. I also don't think Ted Cruz should be directly responsible for, of the hundreds of thousands of protesters that went to the Capitol to peacefully protest, or to protest peacefully, that decided to try to breach the halls where the Congress people were, that the Capitol Police had their guns drawn saying, hey, if you try to come in here, we're going to shoot you. Hey, if you try to come in here, we're going to shoot you. Bang, bang, you tried to keep coming in here and we shot you. And then the other two lunatics
I saw the video of that gal. That's a tragedy is what it is.
Again, it's the same conversation, and I don't want to keep beating a dead horse because we're at just over 2 hours now. I don't think Sanders should be accountable. I don't think Cruz should be accountable. If anybody out there on the right side had the most quote-unquote blood on their hands for the Capitol riot, it would be Trump, who literally said
it'd be Trump and the Proud Boys who organized
in his address to the people who were 200 yards from the Capitol building, and we're gonna go to the Capitol building. Even then, I don't think in the court of law you can hold him accountable for like murder.
They didn't.
Yeah, they didn't.
He got acquitted in his impeachment.
But that's the strongest case for me to make. But I don't think.
Let me be clear. Civilly or criminally, I do not believe Ted Cruz is liable for that.
Yeah.
But socially, he is. Socially, he is. The man should be stripped of his social capital because he played this game to his base that he knew wasn't true, and then people died. That's not equivalent to this guy who shot that congressman. That it just isn't. Sanders didn't sit there for 6 weeks and talk every day about how the presidency was stolen from him and people need to rise up and bring their guns and we're not going to stop you. And then they let them in. Like, I understand the argument. I don't mean to dunk on that. I'm not trying to like dunk on you, Medeiros. That's not my intention. Please don't take it that way. But it's definitely a false equivalence. It's not remotely the same.
Well,
if Bernie Sanders said the world would be better off if Trump was dead, and then some liberal loon with a gun went and shot Trump, then perhaps we would be having a different conversation. But given all that information, I would say that right now, no, that's a false equivalency.
Well, and we can, again, disagree all we want to, but we're still here having a civilized conversation, and I don't hate you, and Ben doesn't hate me, I don't think. And,
I hate
that's
what I hate. I don't like.
That's fine. I've heard worse.
I don't like looking at your handsome mug, idiot. I don't like it.
There you go.
Does the chat have any other questions before we wrap up? Because we are at
Cheers
2 hours and 15 minutes. Before we sign off here, I'll take a shot with you, Dan. Did you grab your flask?
I did. It's the flask I brought to your Halloween party.
Oh, of course.
A couple years ago.
Still in circulation.
Still in service. This bastard's made it, man.
Well, Dan, as always, I don't agree with everything that you have to say, and you don't agree with everything that I have to say, but I still
think we've had a productive conversation.
I think so too. Absolutely. And I say it probably every show. Most people out there want the same thing. We all want people to be, or I shouldn't say we all. Most of us want people to be happy. We want people to be taken care of. We don't want people to go hungry or to go thousands of dollars in debt, but we also have to have constructive conversations as to how we're going to accomplish that, because clearly right now it's not being accomplished.
And that ultimately that's what results in the worst of people is when they run out of options, you get Stalin and you get Hitler.
Exactly.
And America right now is as a historian, I can look at this and I can pretty succinctly say that I believe we are at that crossroads. Capitalism is failing the majority of people, and they're going to get an answer one way or another, whether they go left, whether they go right. The fact of the matter is, milquetoast liberal reform isn't going to fix what's going on here. It's not going to fix climate change. It's not going to fix the economy. It sure as shit isn't going to fix the ever shrinking middle class of the United States. And I mean, Marx talks about it quite a bit in Das Kapital, but that's a conversation we could have another time.
Yeah.
I'd be more than happy to have that with you as well. I figured I'd come on kind of vanilla a little bit, not get too hard on your audience.
No, it's been a good conversation. And
As indeed.
I don't think there's any
Chat doesn't have any
more
questions this week.
conversations. Hey, as always, chat, thank you so much. Luke Free 55. I know who you are, but I'm not going to use your real name. Wade. Combo, as always. Gail, thank you. Squash. Everybody else that was here. Oh, Kristen, my girlfriend, made a couple comments tonight.
She made an appearance calling you out for making her sound like a bad person.
I was trying to say she was a good person, and she's not. She's like... In fact, you want to know someone who is way more left-leaning than I am, it's that girl right there. But we date, and we make it work, Don't have to agree on everything.
Beat you with the stick here in a minute.
She knows that I love her. Love you too, Gail.
Alrighty, well,
Dan.
it was a good one. A good conversation, Dan. I enjoyed listening
Dan, take a shot
to you
with
and your
me,
viewpoints.
It was very fun for me as well. I'd love to be back on at some point. I'll take a drink to that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you guys want to look me up on Twitter, I'm at your daily Danny. My affiliation, I don't usually speak publicly just because it's got some spooky wordage in it that people don't in this country particularly care for. But yeah, I mean, I'm a leftist. Alex is obviously not. It's always nice to sit down and be able to have a constructive conversation.
I typically retweet your stuff, though, so if anybody follows me, especially when you're trashing on the left,
you tell me,
real
you
valid
name one
reasons.
person on the right who trashes the left more than me from further left.
That's very, honestly, dude, that was one of the big reasons why I was like, Dan is a good guest to have, because you're just as hard on the left as most people on the right are.
Like I've said it 1,000 times, the conservatives are confused, and perhaps we disagree on certain things, but
Not
the
all of
liberals
us, okay.
liberals are culpable in the problems that are destroying the nation. So
Yeah.
that's my situation.
Well,
If you're a liberal and you're listening, fuck you.
we'll end on
and
that right
also,
now.
And also, if you move far enough left, you get your guns back. That's what I'll go with.
There you go. Perfect segment into the next episode. All right. Well, I'm going to end with that. I love you guys.
Sounds good.
Love both of you and all of our followers and our listeners. And until next time, be good to each other. Tell somebody you love them.
Thank you for having me on, guys.
Absolutely.
We'll see
Thanks
you
for
later.
coming on, Dan.